I'm Susan McGinnis with Clean Skies News. We're at the G20 in Pittsburgh at the August Wilson Center, talking now with David Waskow. He's the Climate Change Program Director for Oxfam America. David, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, I wanted to ask you, tell me about Oxfam and your efforts here. You guys are a humanitarian organization, and what are you guys hoping to accomplish here at the G20?
We're an international development and humanitarian organization, and we've been seeing the impacts of climate change on the ground in our work around the world, from floods, severe weather events to droughts. And so climate change is an issue that we feel we have to tackle.
How critical are these 2 days to your efforts?
This is a very important moment. This is a real opportunity for the developed countries, especially the U.S. and Europe and other of their developed country colleagues, to step up to the plate to make sure that the resources are there so that developing countries can take the actions they need to on climate change.
Now, a few months ago, you were talking about this pivotal moment, and said we are at a pivotal moment, and you said that after Bonn, you were quite optimistic. How are you feeling now?
Well, I think that there is a real opportunity here, and it'll be a missed opportunity if developed countries don't take the steps they need to. What we're seeing is on the ground in developing countries a real desire to take action. We're seeing countries from China and India to South Africa and Mexico really wanting to move in the direction of clean energy technologies. But there are more resources that are going to need to be put to this. There needs to be a global investment. And we're also seeing countries that are hard hit. In Africa, island states that are facing sea level rise, who really want the resources to be able to adapt to the changing conditions they're facing.
So you see the leaders of those countries pretty much waiting for the ministers here to take some action, make some decisions.
They're really waiting, yes, for the U.S. and Japan and Europe to say that they're ready to put, not just ready to put serious financing on the table as part of a global deal.
The big issues that you talked about months ago are still there. You know, the big one, of course, is a financing mechanism for developed countries to give support to the developing nations. I mean, what's your sense of optimism over that particular issue?
Well, I think there were some helpful statements made in New York earlier this week at the UN summit that the Secretary General sponsored. I think the question is really putting flesh on those bones and taking what was said, the vision that was laid out by many leaders, and making good on it. I think there is an opportunity here. I think it's not clear whether that opportunity is going to be seized,
right,
but we are going to need to see that kind of real commitment by countries and by their leaders heading toward Copenhagen and heading toward a global deal.
But is commitment here critical to success in Copenhagen?
I think strong signals are going to be very important, and it'll be important for the leaders here to make clear that they understand the significance of the challenge in terms of resourcing what needs to happen to tackle climate change, and you know, whether they are going to get there this week or not, I can't say,
right,
but I think that they have an opportunity in their hands that they can seize.
You've said that there are different proposals out there for these financing mechanisms, but that sort of the U.S. and some other countries are not reaching high enough. You still like the Mexico's proposal for the Green Fund idea?
Well, we think there's some good ideas that the Mexican government has put forward. We think the idea of an overarching global fund is important. We do think that there are some ways of funding it that aren't exactly necessarily what the Mexicans have proposed. And we think there's some innovative mechanisms. You can auction off or sell emission allowances internationally. You can use revenues from schemes in the international maritime or aviation sectors.
So this gets it away from it being a contributory thing, which would lead to lack of fulfilled promises.
Right. We don't think that we should rely on governments to cough up from their national budgets. That's just not going to be a predictable enough way of generating the revenues that are needed.
Now, has Oxfam come up with some proposals for mechanisms?
Yeah, well, we've said that emission allowances and auctioning them is one way that you could create quite a substantial amount of resources in the tens of billions of dollars, and also creating schemes in the international maritime and aviation sectors, which right now don't have emission caps on them at all.
Taxing aviation
and so
globally?
you could put various kinds of levies on or put in place carbon trading schemes that would create resources that can go to action in developing countries.
I guess it's all a matter of just how specific they get here. Do you imagine it'll, even if they do talk specifically about this kind of financing framework, it'll be just sort of the general outline of it? How specific do you think they'll get? And what would you call success here at the G20?
I think real success here would be for the countries to identify the scale of resources that are needed, to say that the tens of billions of dollars that really we've assessed and others have said are necessary are going to be generated. Mm-hmm. Getting down into the weeds, I don't think is necessarily the task of the G20 heads of state. I think that the Copenhagen negotiations and that process really is the place to get down into the nuts and bolts.
But these are the finance guys.
The finance guys are here, and the heads of state, I think, are really the ones who are the principal actors on this stage. And so for them, I think it really has to be top-line messages about what the level of resources that are needed are, and that they're going to generate those. I think the detailed mechanisms are something that the finance minister should really take up, and I think the heads of state can direct them to do that. And then the Copenhagen negotiations really are where the true nuts and bolts, I think, have to be worked out. And it's also important to remember that there are a number of countries that aren't at this table. Many of the most vulnerable countries around the world, Africa, Bangladesh, countries from Africa, Bangladesh, the island states are not at this table. And so I think many of those kinds of details are actually going to have to be worked out at that broader table in Copenhagen, where all the countries will be. And
there's still more going on up until Copenhagen. There could be another G20. There are a couple more UN FCCC meetings. So you're optimistic about the rest of the run-up?
I think that there's a lot of work that's being done, very productive work that's being done, and I think we can get there. I think there's a lot of work that will have to get done. But I do think that countries are engaging to try to get there. They need to step up the energy level, though, and they need to step up I think what the leaders here need to do is to give that impetus, to really give that push, so that the people putting the nuts and bolts together actually get it done.
Right. Okay. David Waskow from Oxfam America, thank you so much.
Thank you.